So, everybody, Joe Rogan made some news yesterday when he expressed his support, endorsement, for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis for the presidency in 2024. Let's take a quick look at this, and then we will give our takes here.
Yeah, so all this stuff is happening while we have a dead man as a president.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
Are you throwing out any
it's not fun.
Any support towards anyone? Or are you going to hold off and because
True.
I know didn't Elon Musk come out recently for DeSantis?
Yeah, I think Ron DeSantis would work as a good president. I mean, what he's done for Florida has been admirable.
Look, I feel like I'm doing breaking news right now.
Yeah.
That wasn't even on purpose.
I feel like what he did for Florida, a lot of people gave him a lot of grief, but ultimately he was correct. He was correct when it comes to like deaths. He was correct when it comes to protecting our vulnerable populations. He was correct in terms of distribution of monoclonal antibodies, and he was furious when the government tried to pull those. They were trying to pull very effective treatments. You know, he is not perfect. He's a human being, but what he's done is stand up for freedoms. And people think that so there's some weird gaslighting shit that went on where people equated freedom and saying the word freedom to like right-wing bigotry and hate is so strange.
All right, so very quickly, I'll just give my 2 cents and I'll toss to you. You probably have more to say about this than I do. You're inevitably, of course, going to see, and I've seen some of it already, a lot on the online left who have a hard-on for Joe Rogan, you know, tell people, you know, more in our camp, that, see, we told you he was a right-winger all along. Aren't you a dupe for falling for Joe Rogan just because he said he supported Bernie Sanders? As if politics is the art and science of identifying who's already on your side and blowing smoke up their ass for being on your side. In fact, the art and science of politics is persuasion and bringing people into your camp. Joe Rogan gave the left yes for an answer by supporting Bernie Sanders in the 2020 primary. And rather than take yes for an answer, too many in the Bernie movement decided to respond to that by calling him a transphobe, anti-science Nazi who was somehow this, like, you know, Alex Jones of Spotify. And so what do you expect? He did not find a home on the left because the left also tried to get him canceled a few months back, tried to get him thrown off the air. So what did you think was going to happen? The second point I'll make very, very quickly is he makes an interesting point there at the very end, which is how did freedom become a sort of right-wing buzzword, right? Why do so many people hear freedom and think that this is some sort of code word for right-wing? And I don't think, I mean, I know he didn't consciously make this point, but this is a point that I've been making for a couple of years now, why I think it's so important for the left to reclaim freedom. I have said for many, many years now, I wrote a whole article about it a couple years back. I did a patron-only podcast, which I might unlock for everybody because I think it came out pretty good, talking about FDR's 4 Freedoms speech, where he outlined the 4 basic freedoms that every person on Earth should enjoy, which are split basically into 2 categories, freedoms of and freedoms from. Freedom of speech, freedom of worship. And then the other 2 are freedom from want, meaning we should have economic rights, and freedom from fear, meaning world peace, right? Now, the left is really the only faction talking sense about those latter 2, freedom from want, freedom from fear. We don't really hear any voices of reason coming from anywhere else but the quote-unquote far left on those 2 things. But those first 2 things are equally important, and they're absolutely essential to capturing support from people like Joe Rogan, which is freedom of worship and freedom of speech. You cannot police how people feel about things, and you cannot police what people say, most importantly. So when you try and cancel a guy like Joe Rogan who gave you yes for an answer 2 years ago, this is what happens. This is not proof that he was a right-winger all along. This is proof that he, like most Americans, don't really have a natural political home. They're kind of searching around and seeing where they land. And he tried to land with the Bernie movement, and they pushed him out. And this is what happens.
Yeah, my next article is going to be about this, because you've had a series of people from whom the left would not take yes for an answer. It's Glenn Greenwald put it best. The left is a movement that makes itself smaller.
Right, that seeks to make itself smaller.
They have no sense of, well, because you're talking about religious beliefs. I mean, a lot of the modern left has embraced an ideology that is religious in its anti-science fervor and its absolute intolerance for debate and disagreement. You're dealing with, you might as well be trying to open up a debate about whether there are witches in Salem. They're not going to debate that. Of course, there are witches. So yeah, I mean, he's not the only figure. Look, Elon Musk. We're not big Elon Musk fans, but he was a Democrat, and after the shit they gave him about Twitter, which, by the way, hey, if the point was that they don't want unaccountable oligarchs controlling speech platforms, I'm all for that. But that's not the issue. The issue is which oligarchs are in charge of speech platforms, and they just really didn't like the idea that Musk is talking about opening Twitter back up to everybody and applying First Amendment principles to it. They didn't have an issue with the idea. If Bill Gates did this, they'd be in heaven.
Right.
They'd have. So if their issue was an oligarch, I'd be with them. But that wasn't their issue. Their issue was what he was planning on doing with Twitter. So this is another one. You turned him into a Republican.
Tulsi Gabbard, you could even say.
Tulsi.
The constant Russiagating and smearing of her military record.
One. Yeah. Right. Here's you had someone here who had appeal to the right wing, who you could have kept in the tent if you had not viciously attacked her at every opportunity. And I got to say, it's funny how you're not allowed to use certain kinds of language, rightly so, unless it's an enemy. Do you know how many leftists I saw describing Tulsi Gabbard as a pinup girl for Assad? Just these really demeaning, sexist insults. So it's okay as long as they're the enemy, then you can talk about them in that manner. Yeah, those are three right there that the left could have had. They could have had them in their camp. I gotta ask, with the standards that we're talking about, who can be in the camp? Who can? How many people fit this narrow definition of beliefs where they're not going to be thrown out of the movement? Who really fits this ideology? It's a lunatic fringe of activists dictating policy and speech. And hey, look,
more so speech than policy. I mean, they're not having much success in that realm, but speech, I would say, yes.
Speech. Well, when I say policy, I'm not just talking about government. I'm talking about the policy within institutions. I'm talking about the policy in sciences. I'm talking about the policy when you're trying to get a research grant at a foundation,
right,
the policy in academia, the policy at newspapers and media outlets. They're having a tremendous impact on that.
Sure.
Look, I was talking to somebody about this today. I'm old. I've been through my share of public hysterias, mass psychosis, crazy fads. I've been through my share of these. They always end the same way, with class action lawsuits. A lot of the people who right now are dictating that conversation are going to be slapped with massive lawsuits over the next 10 years. The conversation is already starting to turn on some of these things because they pushed it too far. But you look at somebody like Rogan, A lot of the things that they hated him so much for are going to become conventional wisdom over the next few years, right around the time those lawsuits are starting to hit. The stuff he said about MMA fighting and that sort of thing. Um, the general perspective on that is going to change. The person I really blame in the end is Sanders. Why is he listening to AOC? Why is she listening to her millennial poli-sci course bullshit? Why is he listening to her about whether to accept Joe Rogan's endorsement? This was really we like to blame the media as is appropriate, and we like to blame the DNC as is appropriate, but Sanders again and again, when push came to shove, really would not make the hard choices. He didn't know how to tell his own people to shut the fuck up. And he certainly was never prepared to go all the way with the establishment. In the end, people said he was a grifter. He's not a grifter. He means what he's saying. He's not trying to profit from this. But he's a grifter in the sense that he's talking revolution, and he was never prepared to lead one.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's more or less right. I think, though, the reason I would also blame Bernie for this more than anyone necessarily who we have spoken about is because he's the one who had the support of Rogan, who represents a very mainstream cohort in this country. He represents, I mean, look,
a lot more mainstream than his enemies.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is why he's still on Spotify.
Yeah, and that's why he's the number one, podcast in the country, right?
Right.
I mean,
you took
that.
Somebody who could have been a great force in left politics. And yeah, of course he's looking at DeSantis. Who do you think he's going to look at? The Democrats?
Well, here's the thing.
You guys just tried to cost him his livelihood. You tried to vote him off the island.
And here's the thing about Bernie. When Bernie defers to Joe Biden in 2024, he says, well, I think Biden's doing a good job, and if he seeks re-election, I will support him. Meaning Bernie not only will not challenge him for the nomination, which I think would be a fool's errand at this point, but he would not support a challenge to Biden's nomination. He's basically signing off on 4 more years of this utter hell that the country is being put through now. So at that point, Bernie Sanders is functionally a Democrat. He's a Biden-supporting Democrat. And so there's no longer any functional distinction between Bernie Sanders and the mainstream Democratic Party. Bernie, in his heart of hearts, is better than them. We all know that. But what the hell difference does that make?
Functionally,
right?
functionally, it makes no difference.
Functionally, they're the exact same. And so if Joe Rogan is looking to back someone other than Joe Biden, he can't really look to the Bernie left because the leader of that movement has signed off on 4 more years of Joe Biden. Right. So where else is he going to go?
Well, but not only that, these are the people, not Bernie personally, but these are the people who just tried to cost him his livelihood.
Well, yeah, I mentioned that too.
When is he ever going to go and sympathize with the left again? And I've noticed David Dole keeps doing these videos showing that he's more right-wing lately. Now, I've never been a regular listener. I'll take him at his word. That doesn't surprise me. Of course. Is he bringing more right-wing people on his show? Probably. How can he even get left-wing people? The whole left just tried to cancel him.
Right. The only left-winger he's had on.
People are going to come on.
Right. He had Ben Burgess on, who we interviewed on our show. Ben is a good guy, always up for a debate and a talk, and it wasn't even like a contentious debate. It was actually a good episode that he did. But a guy like Ben Burgess is sort of like us in the sense that, like, he's not out to cancel anybody. Burgess wrote in the Daily Beast that he shouldn't be thrown off of Spotify when that whole thing went down.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, look, it comes back to the 4 freedoms. You have bread and butter issues. There was a series of Norman Rockwell paintings published after that 4 freedoms speech based on the 4 freedoms. Americana, right? We need everybody safe, both from the threat of violence and the threat of poverty, starvation. And we need everybody free to worship as they please and speak as they please. If the left owns that, the left cannot lose. But the left is forfeiting, I would say, all of them, because they're too weak to stand up for the freedom of want, freedom of fear stuff. And in terms of freedom of worship and freedom of speech, they're just totally ceding that to the other side. And that's how you get things like this.
Please clap.